Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of Table Talk roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. And we're live. But yeah, welcome back. So today we actually wanted to kind of dive a little bit into improv versus planning for your sessions, because there's definitely like a multitude of different styles, and we've touched a lot on like the different styles of DMing, different styles of gameplay, different styles of actually playing. And
both done a mix of like
a mix of improv and actually like planning sessions. And I've alluded to a lot of like our Strixhaven session, and obviously that's the first one I've ever DM'd and kind of dove into. And I can say that the first time that we sat down at that table, I was up till like midnight most nights or more.
You would like message me that you were like playing a ton and you were like written out all your
I wrote a bunch of stuff because I was like, I want to make sure my monologue introduction is good. I made like props and I was just going ham, and I think I printed out like little potion laminates from this cute little Etsy shop, which we still use, but they definitely did not come in handy that first time.
Need them the first episode. Thankfully we were like getting it. You also never know.
Yeah, honestly, you never know. But I did a lot of planning, and I think in the sessions after, as like I kind of started to find the swing of things, played around a little bit with like the format of how our sessions go, because it is like kind of a slice of life. You're in school situation, but I also want you to have like that feeling of the D&D experience and coming together as a party and going to do things together. So we played it out as like, I started being more of like the planning of the session was just, okay, I know that we're going to hit these points. And then I'm going to let y'all kind of like free roam around campus. And then you're going to come back together for some kind of like mutually assured goal.
Yeah.
But you're still like free to make a lot of choices in that.
Go to our classes, go to our clubs, all that.
Go to your classes, go to your clubs. And also, like, you guys are lovely, but like there's no way in hell I could ever plan for all the shenanigans that y'all end up putting me through. So eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, all of this like superfluous planning is not super necessary when half of it is going to get thrown out in the middle of the session.
Because we'd have a habit of like starting to be like, we're going to get to some plot stuff. And yeah, we did not.
We did not, in fact, get to plot stuff. We just started a host club and gossip.
Which was great.
Which is great.
But if you had prepped all of that and like not slept.
Exactly.
Not super sustainable.
Not super sustainable. But it is nice because like we play once a month. So I have a lot of like bandwidth to plan with plenty of like leeway ahead of time if I do need to. But also at times I can also just step in front of that DM screen, have zero things planned, and I'm like, I'm just gonna fly by the seat of my pants and see where y'all take it. And I think also that kind of, and we've touched on this with a few guests, but the point of DMing is not necessarily to railroad them through a story that you've written. Because yes, you can get passionate about like everything, all the work that you've done and the world.
Everything that could happen. I think it's one of the things that if you have a story that you want to tell, you're better served to like write that as a novel or like a comic or something where it's like you creating the story.
Yes.
Whereas if it's a collaborative, D&D should be, and all TTRPGs should be collaborative storytelling. And so that requires a good amount of just going off the cuff. And seeing what the hell happens.
Exactly. And if you're going to get too attached to like the very specific ideas of how you think that story is going to go, I think you're going to find yourself oftentimes like disappointed.
Yeah, or frustrated or just not having as much fun as you could be.
Because your fun as the DM is just as important as everybody else's at the table. But there is an element of like the skill of flexibility, improvisation there. And I feel like most of the time now I lean towards the improv style stuff. I have the general like big bullet points of where the story's going, but it's kind of like, I know point A is here. I know point Z is here, and everything else the fuck in between. It's just going to be I'm going to try to guide y'all gently as you make your decisions and eventually get us there. But it is okay if we kind of divert off the path a little bit.
And like have a short list for how we might approach certain bigger situations.
Yes.
So you're not fully blindsided, but not feel like.
And I like to think I know y'all well enough at this point where it's like, yes, you throw me curveballs often. Like Bex throws me curveballs all the time. So does Alyssa. So do you.
Yeah, especially with this character. Like we're settled into our characters enough.
Yeah.
That you kind of have a feel. Obviously for us as people, but also like what our characters' motivations are and how they're likely to react.
Exactly.
To certain things.
So there's an element where I'm like, I think you're gonna lean towards this situation. But also sometimes you throw stuff at me that I'm like, I could not have imagined that you would take this route. But now I also love it. And it's like redirected all of the planning that I am doing in the back end. I'm like, okay, we got to scrap this because this is more interesting. And I love that part of the collaborative storytelling. But then also, like, we just had our first arc finale
my baby, Anya.
For your character. And we tend to play really long sessions, and we've realized that this is kind of not normal in the D&D community.
We're a minimum of like 6 to 8.
6 to 8 on a normal session.
Like 6 to like 10 or 12 is our general like span of somewhere in there, depending on like all the life factors. But the one we just played, I think it was 18.
Yeah, and like
we had so much to get through.
Yes, because I was also like, because it is like a school setting, there's elements of like, you guys are kind of speed running through your school year, and we're not going to act out every single day of the school year that happens. We're just kind of.
We'd be there for like 4 government years, like fucking going through.
4 government years for one year.
Exactly.
Of in school time. And so I kind of like do a little bit of time-lapsey stuff, and we dictate time with the exams.
Yeah, and I like that a lot because our party, previous to that session, when we sort of did the bigger time skips of like what we kind of do school-wise through the year and like what we do to forward the plot before we got to like the big fight at the end. Our party previous to that did not like each other and had not been working very well together.
Yeah.
And like that was super fun to play with, but we also needed, like, we as players, you're like, these hoes need to fucking get along, or we're not gonna be able to finish this arc without a TPK.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, we've got to figure. So that gave us some leeway to be able to figure out skipping over some of those like months of just quiet passive aggression that you have with your
well, that was a big part of why I was planning it the way that I did, because like we were having a lot of moments of like inner party conflict to where, might I add, everybody as a player was super consenting super comfortable with. Half the time they're like getting into screaming matches in character, and as soon as that scene is done, they're like wiggling their little fingers at each other, like squeeing over how dramatic and intense the scene was.
No, we all loved it, but logistically,
as characters and getting y'all to work together, it presented a pretty unique challenge as a DM, because I'm like, okay, how am I gonna get these bitches to cooperate towards a mutual means? And I knew that session that we were going to go into for that finale one was going to be long, because like you said, I needed to do some big time skips that would give y'all room to both develop as your characters individually, but also develop those connections together, which I think we did really well, because we had a lot of tender moments. We had a lot of like really funny moments that broke that tension, I think.
It was a good mix of like chaotic, funny, and tender and sweet, and like really fucking heartbreaking and sad, which was the goal.
So I think like doing those time skips, and I had to really meticulously, like I told y'all like, hey, you know, in the first half, it's going to be you deciding how your school year went, and there's going to be specific actions you're going to take.
Yeah, we each had a number of vignettes for each of our characters. We told you in advance what we were going to do, and like worked it out with each other, because like sometimes they would involve other characters doing stuff and all of that. And then we had leading up to sort of the quest to get into the dungeon at the end, and then the big, you know, hidden murder dungeon on the campus.
Which I think it's also nice. I think what was really helpful too was that as a DM, not all the planning was on me. So like I gave you the structure of like, hey, you're going to have like 3 actions of what you do in your school year. You're going to have like 3 actions of how you investigate this situation that you guys are currently in.
Yep.
And also you were gaining a level and you were getting your 3rd level. So that means picking your subclass. So there was going to be an extra action of you guys. I didn't want it to just be, I didn't want it to just be like, okay, you're level 3 and you picked your subclass and that's it.
Especially for 3rd, because that's like a big.
It's a big
like, I
jump.
think we went from 1 to 2. It was like after we taken our first exam,
Mhm.
and like that was easy enough to be like, all right, like we just kind of we're a little more proficient than we used to be.
Exactly. You've
But yeah,
learned new
it's like,
skills.
we're getting like for my character, she's a paladin, so like she's taking her oath at that point, and like everyone's picking subclasses, and like third is a hefty level plot wise for characters, so it was nice to have those set aside moments.
And it like sets
for
the
that.
tone for your character going and like going forward,
Mhm.
you know? So I wanted that to be a very like specific moment. So I think it was really helpful for me in that like I gave y'all the structure of the things that we were going to do. You obviously decide what those things are going to be. And we were having dialogue back and forth so that I knew what to prepare for, because I had a general idea of like, you're like, okay, I know I want to have this scene with my patron. I know I want to investigate this, and I know I want to do this with my free time. So then I could be like, okay, I know what the structure of the session is going to be like. I know how I'm timing, like when I'm skipping from your vignette to Alyssa's and how the general vibe is going to go.
And like what improv scenes you kind of needed to prepare for, and like which characters and NPCs you kind of needed to have.
Prepare the NPCs that I was going to play and
because
all
like
that
some
stuff.
of them, we like all of our guardians, that they were always going to have a big role in that, but it's like when they're going to come in and all that, like that was important for you to know.
Yeah.
Just especially for like that, like there were things each of our characters knew that the others didn't, and like it was a lot to balance. From the DM perspective.
And then I think on top of that, preparing all of that like RP stuff, and then that second half of the session was going to be like the dungeon crawl, which I've talked about this a lot. I'm not a combat girly. Never have been as a player. And I struggled a bit with like early on, both in that session and a couple one shots that I've run for y'all, where I had to like build a combat and structure it out and things like that. And so I had no idea what is balanced and what's too OP. I didn't want to cause a TPK, but I also didn't want it to be too easy and not feel like challenging enough. And so I remember like for a lot of the initial combats, I used like the D&D Beyond encounter builder, which is helpful as a tool in the sense of like I have all my monsters there. I can keep track of some initiative. I don't like that I can't change, like, because you can do the characters, character A, character B, character C, and I kind of have to take a separate note of like who that person is. And maybe I'm dumb and I don't know how to change it, but I tried to look and I couldn't change it. So it was helpful for having that and like quick access to stat blocks and stuff, because I do tend to play with like my computer there at the session. So it's nice to have quick and easy access to that. But I often found like that their tool for it tells you like these are all the monsters you picked, these are all your players and their level, and how hard or difficult that encounter is going to be for them.
Yeah.
And I used that to try to create something challenging but still achievable. And then oftentimes I just found that I was like, this just felt like too easy.
It's softballs a little bit, and like I guess that's probably a good thing over making it
going
like,
to
so the swinging the other way. But like it's tricky to, because so much of it comes down to the dice rolls too, of like obviously if you have more experienced players who like are optimizing their characters and all that jazz, like that gives you more room to play with as a DM, throw more stuff in, versus if you have like newer people who maybe haven't figured out all of the ins and outs and the best combinations of things to do. But also it's like if the dice roll like shit, then you're not gonna,
then even rats will get you at that point.
Yeah, and like, but if you don't roll anything below 15, then you can mow through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so much of it is random too that it's hard to figure out.
Yeah. And I was just having like a real struggle with like I know we have the RP down packed,
Yeah.
right? Like that is where my strengths lie, that is where y'all's strength lies. But I know that also as players, like we've gone to other tables and we like thoroughly enjoy combat and we like to flex our skills and we like to be tactical in that way. So I was like, I know we're more RP heavy, but like I want, when combat does happen, I want it to feel
Yep.
like a good combat. So I was really struggling with that. And then I knew for your session, because it's a dungeon crawl, I was like, I want to make sure I have good encounters. And I worked really hard to try to like structure it, not just like a plain and boring combat, but I wanted there to be elements of like different things that could change the situation.
Yeah, it all felt very fluid, which like kept keep the tension high. But it's like how we went down in the first room, and they're like the baby corpse flowers, and the couple of like students who were working with the Dean Lisette that was ended up being responsible for like killing Anya and turning her to a reborn, and then also like killing her parents and turning them into like a creepy ass homunculus. But like that was a nice like first little encounter. But like if we hadn't sort of gotten that one guy to like talk and work with us for a bit and turn off the tanks with the corpse flowers in it, that would have been a much more resource taxing fight if we had had to fight 4 fucking baby corpse flowers.
Yeah.
Because we never really did end up fighting any of them. So like, we didn't know how
they work necessarily.
Or like how much HP they had and things like that. And like we don't have we're third level. Like we're better, but we don't have a ton of just we don't have as much spending power when it comes to like spells and things to just be throwing it.
Yeah, and it was meant to be like not a full huge dungeon because I knew we were going to be like cut for time, but I was like I'm going to plan 3 encounters. There's like a small one, a kind of bigger one, and then there's like the big ultimate one.
Yeah, because it was nice because like Jack is Alyssa character Jack is a barbarian, and then it's like we were able to go and just split off and sort of take half of the guards, and Callisto kind of was Becca's character was able to play like support. And then it was just like after that second encounter when we were moving around the dungeon like into Lisette's office and stuff, and we weren't running into people, that in itself was also unnerving. Because like one, it makes sense that this is not like a super packed place because like we are underground on campus. Like this is a not widely known thing, but it's a very disturbing thing. There's dismembered bodies everywhere.
Yeah.
Like it's a reborn resurrection factory idea. Like what she was trying to make, and if she wasn't able to make, the only reborn she was successfully make, I believe, was Anya.
Yeah.
Which she did not do it successfully because she was able to like, get some of her memories back and all that jazz. But
she was not like an all the way mindless.
No, we did. We played around with the reborn lore a bit, and I really like what we did with that, where she still has like she's like a quasi. So she has some of the abilities of like she doesn't have to sleep as much as a normal person. She doesn't like have to eat as much, but if she doesn't, she still pays the price because she's not
all the way
full reborn. But like digging through that and knowing that there was more shit, and for me knowing that like that was the encounter where we were going to find out what happened to her parents, and that they were going to be somewhere in this dungeon because that's where she had initially sort of escaped from. And like we built up so much of that in like out of session RP and all of that, and we like think Bex rolled that like nat 20 to get the guy that we were kind of taking as a hostage.
Oh yeah, the nat 20 intimidation. I was like, well, he's just gonna divulge as much as he humanly possibly can.
Yeah, he's gonna like unlock a door and let us in, and but there was that moment where he said, like, oh, the other like couple that was down here, like they're stitched together now. And I'm like, well, fuck, that's bad, and that's probably her fucking parents. And
you asked for it.
I did ask for it. I did consent to the trauma, and it was very, very, very good.
Yeah.
Because I needed it to be bad because I wanted to have a genuine reaction to it in the moment because I'd spent so much time with that character, and like I didn't know if I was gonna be able to like Crown Command or something. So I wanted the stakes to be high and it to be painful to go through and painful to watch, and like it should be uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's a horrifying thing. And it was. I
did do the thing.
We we're going down into that last dungeon, and I was concerned as the player, how the fuck, because by that point we had kind of put together that it was probably the Dean of Growth was set,
Yeah.
who was
Like through y'all's investigative part of like the first half.
Yeah, like there was a cipher that I worked out, and like my guardian already kind of like didn't trust her until like we were getting enough information where it's like something's fucky with this person. And the other Dean of Decay, Valentine, was kind of used as the red herring because his form is very monstrous.
He's very creepy looking. He's the necromancy Dean.
Yeah.
It was like the easy call.
Yeah. Lovely. He's the best guy around, but it's very
the best guy around. I love him.
I love him too. But yeah, but like Anya spent most of that campaign being horrified of him because when she escaped, she like saw him in the woods, and so she thought it was he had something to do with it, right? When really he was just like out getting a midnight snack on the campus and like trying to find a nice deer.
Yeah,
he was minding his business.
He was just minding his business.
The more you know. But anyway,
wrong place, wrong time.
Like, thankfully, we had filled in our fucking guardians that like what we were doing, they were aware we were going, and like there was an elevator in Lisette's office down to like the murder dungeon, and so like I think I had Anya send a text to Ambrose, who was another dean of like the
Dean of Shadow
at Silverquill, and then once we actually confirmed that this was to do with Lisette, like Bex reached out to Pietra, her aunt, and told her like, okay, this is some bullshit. And so like, all right, we're on our way. So I think they were coming in the way Anya probably went out like months ago when or almost a year ago when she had escaped. So they had a lot of fighting to get through. So they kind of didn't bust in until Lisette had like had her evil monologue. But I'm like, there's no way we are going to be able to fight a dean and not die.
Yeah.
I was like, that is simply not going to be possible, much less
what not at level 3
had occurred with like Anya's parents and all of that. And so like Valentine was sort of struck being like fed on by the corpse flowers when we went in, which like I guess Lisette didn't know what he was.
No, because I was like, y'all had privileged access to information through your guardians that like otherwise wouldn't be had just by the regular schmegular people on campus.
Yeah. And so like they were using the corpse flowers to like dispose of all the bodies from the failed experiments and the failed like resurrection attempts. So I guess she was effectively thinking like, oh, well, I'll just also dispose of Valentine. But it would have been fucky because like he would have died. But then if someone hits him or kills him, if he dies, whether he dies or not, but he will absorb whoever has or whatever has hit him. So if he had absorbed a giant fucking corpse flower that had killed God only knows how many things, like, yeah, that would have been a mess.
And like from the perspective of like me having been planning that session, because obviously like I had to plan for a bunch of different scenarios because I had to account for whether or not you guys would actually bring your guardians or inform them. I know you were working with them, but like I'm like, there's a chance that they just go off into the dungeon half-cocked.
Yeah, both our guardians and us have not historically had the best communication skills. And like we've tried to learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
We did, but like for you as like running it, there was no way to know if like somebody got desperate or freaked out. I was like, fuck it, let's
exactly. Because I think especially in that situation initially, you guys were not intending on taking the elevator down. You just knew there was a secret doorway in her office and you wanted to know what was on the other side.
Yeah, well, we didn't know what was behind. Like Bex's character Callista had seen that there was like a rug that was ruffled. So it looked like something. The bookcase was a secret door that opened, but we didn't know what was behind it.
So there was elements for me that I was like, they're kind of on the fence of whether they're going to go down or not. So I'm like, if they leave, they might have limited access to getting back in because of obviously having broken into her office. But then also there would have been consequences to Lisette taking action. And y'all would have had to find other ways to get in, which there were other ways to get in.
They would have just been more heavily guarded.
Probably.
That was the best way for us to go in
Mhm.
because
But also the
nobody
hardest one to achieve.
yeah, because we had to go get like Calista called in, had her aunt call in a favor to get some like crazy
Some
ass
buku.
like arcane lockpick thing
Yeah.
that could like do it and then deconstruct and not set off any of
Yeah.
the boards and all of that. So yay for Nepo babies and
Mhm.
having rich families.
Yeah. And I know that, like, for example, for that final combat, because like you said, Lisette is overpowered.
Yeah, what level is Lisette? Is she like
All the deans are 15.
15? Okay.
Yeah. All the
So I know
deans
we
and
said
like
that, like Anya's parents and like Pietro are probably like 18 to 20.
yeah,
But
deans
they're still actively like adventuring and out doing fucky shit. And like her dad's or was in his lab, you know, making war crimes.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're
deans are 15. Guild masters range between 15 to 20. And then everybody else societally is like dispersed depending on your position or station.
Free.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter.
There was an element of like, you know, if you guys bring your or like notify your guardians, I was always planning on not having them show up immediately because of then the other combats would be trivial.
Yeah.
Because they're overpowered. So I wanted y'all to have that like
and I
interaction
that too. I was like, we need to tell our guardians because I think if we don't, we're gonna fucking die. But also, and I kind of trusted that you would not want to do this. So like, I wanted us to sort of work through the dungeon and figure things out and have that creeping fear and tension mount as we went. Because we had found out that there was like one room that the guy told us that like they were effectively like torturing Valentine or just trying to feed him with the corpse flower or whatever. And then there was the other room, which was like the resurrection room, which was the map you found that was awesome and horrifying. And there's just like pits of bodies, like blood. And so probably good for everyone's sanity that we didn't go into that room.
Yeah. And there's definitely combats we didn't encounter. One, because of time. It's 4 a.m. But then also just in general, and again, it's part of that, like, I planned for a lot. I was thankful in that case that I overplanned, and then I can make judgment calls as we're going, because there were factors of like me watching y'all's energy levels, pacing, and then also
keep the tension.
Wanting to keep exactly. And so I knew that there was instances of like, I think this is a good cadence, and just making judgment calls to either pull encounters. So there were supposed to be other like smaller encounters in different rooms that y'all got into. But again, I was just like, you know, it's getting late and I want us to make sure we get to like the big stuff. So I was just like, I mean, this is a restricted section of the laboratory, so there's not many people over here.
Right. Like we're in a restricted section of a highly secretive.
Exactly. So it made sense thematically. And then y'all didn't expect Lisette to be there because you thought she was distracted.
Right. So yeah, I think we definitely thought of like, okay, because Lisette was supposed to be teaching a class.
Yeah.
Then, which like, what fucking who in the registrar's office had her and never figured out that she wasn't in room 105 or whatever the fuck. That's a question.
Or somebody let her know.
Or that maybe. Yeah, because it could be. Oh, you know what? You know, you asked me if Anya's going to have any questions during the interrogation. Then, because Anya's a paladin to a death god, and she's a vengeance paladin to a death god. And so Bex is helping.
We're trying not to look at Bex because she's helping us
film, and so she's behind the camera like this, and it's killing me. But yeah, so Anya's god is basically on a fucking warpath because he's we homebrewed him, but he's a very preserving the sanctity of life and death, and like consensual on death is one thing, but you know, murdering people and turning them into reborns for your own fucking amusement and your inability to let go of people, including Lisette's partner was McCall's old champion. Yeah. And he's like, hey, what you're not gonna fucking do is
desecrate my champion
into a reborn and hold his soul hostage. So
well, she wasn't trying to turn him to a reborn. She was trying to bring him back, because there is like true resurrection.
That's true.
I think is one of the most powerful resurrection spells that you can do.
It's like a ninth level.
However, there is conditions to it of like the
soul
soul
has
has to be willing, or it can't be being held by something else in the
Yeah.
afterlife, which his soul
And
did not
McCall's like,
belong.
no.
Yeah, it was McCall's
McCall's like, fuck off for real.
property, but not in a bad way of like, it's like you're my champion, and when you pass, I will preserve your afterlife. And
like McCall's the god of the dead and the god of death.
yeah,
And so he is responsible for, after you leave the mortal coil, like you belong in his domain.
exactly.
And that is like, he is the only death god in the world, like that.
Yeah.
You are.
And
his.
Lisette was just, yeah, I mean, Lisette is one of these like most powerful healing people in the canon.
Right.
And I think the ego of that and being so frustrated that like she is the only person that could, and the thing keeping her from bringing him back is his god. And it's that.
And also like Lord her champion, his will.
Yeah. And like,
I was like, I'd really rather not.
Yeah.
He's like, please.
It's everything he stood for. And then it's
me fondly and like.
And she's like, no.
And she's like, no, I'm gonna keep you in a giant test tube.
Yeah. Until I can figure out how to like surpass this.
So that'll be a fun little awkward conversation they get to have in the afterlife when her ass shows up at the crossroads and everyone's like, what?
Oh, I think McCall's got his own plans, but
I need a cutscene of what happens when the set gets to the crossroads.
I'll figure that out. I'll take a note of that somewhere.
I just need that for me, for Anya, and for me, Mariah.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Very off track, but circling back, because I haven't fucking forgotten that. We went by the sort of front desk, like guard. There's a receptionist basically that like is receiving people that are going back toward. It's just Lisette's office, right? Yeah. Valentine's office is not down.
No, he is in a whole separate section of Witherbloom.
Yeah, so it's just Lisette's office, and it's like in a tower. Her office is at the top of a tower, and the murder dungeon was underground at the bottom. So. Yeah, McCall might have to have Anya kill that receptionist, because it will be a thing of like anyone that was involved in this at any degree must go. And he's like, come to my office right now, and my office is beyond the mortal coil, and that's a you problem. Like, so
I love the imagery of McCall being like a principal. You're getting called to his office.
Yeah. In the same way that people like kind of talk about like Hades sometimes, it's like Hades is just the god of the dead, so it's like he's doing like the paperwork. Like there is half of McCall's duties that are like him being
it's the boring
this,
administrative stuff,
avenger and this warrior, and he has his own very complicated emotional stuff. And like, McCall's my baby, I love him. I'm working on a novel and stuff that worked on like how he got where he is, because it's so fascinating, like what we've kind of hooked up together. But yeah, then there's the other side where you're just like administrating and regulating and like finding.
He's pushing up his big brimmed glasses and he's like calling names to his office.
Yeah, like all the fucking shades and all of the spirits of shit that, and like that is some paperwork that he's like, fucker, I did see this before I became a god. And they should put that in the pamphlet.
They should put that on the job description.
Yeah. Before, you know, you go and
before you go killing the previous death god.
Yeah. And surround him.
It's just common decency, some due diligence.
You need to give the full scope of like your day to day. So people know. But it is that thing. And he's like, God damn it, Dave. And there's a wrath of it, but there's also because he's ancient, because he's seen so much fucked up shit. There's also that like dissociating and desensitization from your own experience, where he's just like, can we fucking not? He's like, I don't ask for a lot. I just generally don't interrupt the flow of life. And
when people die, just leave them.
Just let them go. If they don't, like, just you can cast a resurrection spell if they want to come back.
If they want to come back,
they'll come back. If they don't want to fucking see you again, don't act like a creepy ex. Don't act like Joe from you.
The crazy ex.
And try and put him in a fucking, like, don't put him in a test tube. Don't kidnap a child and kill her and resurrect her. Don't do that. Like, I don't ask for much. So it's just him being
bare
this,
minimum,
like, bedraggled, like, father principal figure. Yeah, I love that.
I love that
That's
canon.
Hilarious to me. I need to sketch that. But anyway, wildly off topic. Yeah, Anya doesn't have to figure out Because she is also going to want to know who all wasn't read into this. And then she's going to have a duty because she is now McCall's champion to have a role in the cleanup of whoever was involved and was not had knowledge of it, no longer be bombing about the great city of Jordan. And I really hope Lisette's TA didn't know about it because he's a very cute centaur.
I'll give that to you. He was not involved.
Thank God.
Because he is a precious being.
Because we had a full fun, like, save a horse, ride a centaur moment. And I was like, I don't want that to be messed up. And like him and Jack had a cute moment. And I was like, I would super hate to have to murk him. So yeah, I'm glad.
I would hate to have to murder this man. No, yeah. It was a time planning.
Yeah, that's my headcanon. The fucking receptionist.
The people that are like involved and like all of that stuff. And also like, yeah, the inner workings of like her office. How much of that is she aware of when it's happening and all of that stuff?
Yeah, because like
how weird.
Oh, somebody slid a paper through the door. That was horrifying. I startled easily.
I also was like, am I going to get up and fling these stones?
It sounded like somebody was opening the door. And I'm like, I know I locked that.
It's on camera too. See it in the front.
Well, we all experienced it together. And there's something to be said for that.
It's literally sticking out of it.
Here. You can see it in the front. It's a goddamn Chinese takeout menu.
The goddamn Chinese takeout?
Yeah.
Why is it?
He's like, do you have time to hear about our Lord and Savior?
Which you should see the
crab
corpses of all the other fucking business cards that I just haven't picked up for whatever reason. I don't know.
Your graveyard, you mean? At your door?
Yes. Yeah. Like, is that not a sign for you that I'm not accepting like bulletins?
Yeah.
From fucking. Do you not want to hear about your Lord and Savior Kung Pao chicken? Like, no, please do not.
Put that shit on the adventure board.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, where was I going with that? Yeah, like, why did it way back to the combat? Our Guardians kind of came in at a great time because they threw out, like, one threw up a force wall. And so they're like, we'll handle Lisette because we are at least her level or higher.
Yeah.
And it was 3-on-1. And so like the party work on freeing Valentine and all that. So like,
which like sometimes as a DM, when you're like thinking up a scenario, you're like, God, I hope there's a spell that fucking helps me achieve this. And like, I remember just Googling frantically, and Force Wall is one of those things that like things cannot go back and forth, including spells. And literally the only thing that can make it go away, like even a dispel magic doesn't work. It would have to be disintegrate. So like
that bitch.
Lisette would have had to have that prepped or something. So it's like it's a good.
You don't have 9th level spell. Disintegrate is a 9th level spell, isn't it?
I think so.
I think so too. And you don't have 9th level spells at level 15.
Well then, yeah, there you go.
I'm pretty sure you don't.
That I wasn't really thinking about, but I was like, in case she does, she didn't have that shit prepped that day.
Yeah, because I was like a little bit worried if I'm like, I super hope that our Guardians don't fucking get killed. But like, probably should have more faith in them because they're like, we've been out in these streets.
It's 3 of them, and then also like
there's 2 casters.
Yeah,
Jack is
2
like
casters and a barbarian,
a giant fucking dragonborn barbarian that just came in with like a warhammer and a dream. If he's like, I've been called in the ball,
and I'm going bone.
Like I work in the government. I don't get to do this shit as much anymore. Like, let me take my goddamn suit off, and I will be right there.
Yeah, that
was nice because it kind of separated the immediate concern of like, okay, we don't have to worry about just like a fucking bean one-shotting us of like a godforsaken fireball or something. But then like we had to free Valentine before he turned into like a monstrous form, and then you also had that timer running between when like the forbidden like mom dad homunculus would get there,
would join the chat. Yeah,
and like we didn't know that that's what it was eventually. And so like I think I had a moment where I forgot that the guys are like, oh, they're stitched together, because I was trying to like emotionally prepare for what that might be.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like I know Anna's parents have probably been turned into reborns or turned into something, right? They're no longer themselves. They're not going to know her, or there may be a moment of recognition, but like she's going to have to kill them. And so I thought of like, oh, there's going to be like a horde of reborns that we have to account for, like a very like, 28 days later as it's like the fast zombies.
I think so.
I have horrifying nightmares, so I can't watch a lot of zombie movies because my brain's like, hey, would you like to dream about being ripped apart? Because you're going to. I'm like, I really would. Thank you. So that's kind of what I was accounting for. So when like I was the only one that rolled well on perception.
To notice that there was like something coming.
Yeah, there was like noises and weird, groans and scratches and shit down in the hall. So like, fuck, we are like Valentine was not free, and like Callista was trying to turn off. Like there was like 8 corpse flower tanks, I think, and like also if those fuckers come out, that's gonna be a problem because again we circumvented it before, but that was only 3, and now there's 8. Along with like the big mama that's like on the wrong
the
side.
Big bitch on the other side. Yeah.
So I think I had Jack go to the door and to hopefully try to like shut the door so we get like at least maybe like a round or 2 of like, because everything was like heavy metal doors. So it's like we get something and maybe we get Valentine free and then he can fight with us and like that'll be great. Because Valentine, like you told me, in post like has a thing where he can't harm students.
Yeah.
Like that's part of how he was
allowed to be on campus.
He's like a Theranos, and it's like a blend of a bunch of different horrifying cryptids and mythological creatures that he's absorbed.
Yeah, essentially everything that has ever killed him, he's absorbed, and his level of humanity is dependent on basically the last things he's absorbed. So the more monstrous the last thing he killed is, he reverts to like a more primal, monstrous form, and he would have to kill a lot of humans to make up for that like monstrosity, like the balance within.
So the last thing he absorbed had been a giant big mama corpse flower that had been.
It would take a minute for that man to come back.
And like fucking townspeople or whoever Lisette was like, that's another thing. Where the fuck was she getting these people?
Don't worry about it.
They're reborn. So I have interrogation, so I'm gonna fuck it. I'm gonna make it my business. But like that, it would have been very hard, if not impossible, to like revert him to a form where he could like exist peacefully and have some amount of like consciousness and control over himself and not just be bestial.
Yeah.
So like there was that tiny moment of like there were a few tendrils left that I needed to get off of him. And then Jack had one of those like chain tattoos. So like he got to the door as the homunculus, like the hands wrapped around and it pulled itself into the frame. And it did slam attacks.
Yeah.
Because it was just like this big horrifying. I should post that on our fucking Instagram so everyone else can see what you did to me.
Put me on blast.
I consented to it, and I am more proud of that combat and that session and this arc of that character than anything else I've ever
I'll have to look up who the original artist was because I do definitely want to make sure we credit them.
Find it, credit them, and also ask them if they're doing okay. Because fucking hell. It is
a horrifying image.
It gets worse the longer you look.
Yeah. But like I was scouring the internet for that.
Long.
The arms are very long.
That they don't need to be that long.
2 people's worth of arms.
I hate that. I hate them. It's just like a dangling corpse with like this big ass. It's awful. I'll share. We'll find it and we'll fucking share it so everyone else can experience this as well. For generosity, but like
charity.
That thing came in the door, and then I had a point where I rolled a 2 to try. I rolled like 2 2s to try to free Valentine or whatever. So I wasn't able to cut through the last of his bonds. Like, and then as
it was lifting itself for a slam attack.
Lifting itself to slam down into Jack, and it saw me, and like whatever was left of my parents' psyche recognized that it was their daughter and like moaned out her childhood nickname. And then so Anya heard that. She's like, God damn it, don't turn. Because like the whole time she knew something.
On top of hearing Jack scream in that exact moment. So like I think of the moment of like, it's one of those like innate reactions that you can't really help. If you hear a loud noise or you see movement, you're gonna like look.
Turn, right. And so she looked and she saw like the stitched together elements of her parents' face, like one of each of their eyes and like her mother's nose and her
his mouth,
mouth, and like just this like part of her mother's hair. I'm just like,
It was very Full Metal.
very, very much so. And yeah, she breaks and just like, because I also rolled a 2 on the wisdom save.
Yeah, 3 2s in a row, which is, by God, when dice tell a story.
But it made sense. It wasn't, she wasn't going to see that and just be like, all right, time to carry on. Like, I think even if I had passed that wisdom save, I would have elected to fail just because. So then, like, Valentine, Bex's character Callisto was able to free Valentine. And there was a very sweet, sad moment where, like, Anya's god McCall kind of used Valentine's form to project himself onto so he could be corporeal and like see Anya, because he was more so, we've kind of had candidate where, especially when
he's a little formless sometimes.
Well, and especially because like he's not physically there. It's not like a god has possessed Anya, but when you're like enacting like acts of vengeance or whatever, like trying to restore that order in his name, he's like, I'm gonna watch that shit.
He's like a guiding hand.
Yeah, he's a guiding hand, and he'll come down and sort of look through and just monitor the situation through his champion. It's like sight and everything, just so he can be aware of what's happening. So there was that moment where, yeah, he became a bit more corporeal and like picked Anya up and put her helm down and handed her sword. And then he kind of faded back into her mind almost, and it was Valentine that helped her out, and that shit made me cry. And then
that was an off the cuff decision, which I was very proud of.
It was so fucking good. And it was just like this very great moment where it's this character that like Anya's been horrified of and suspicious of and angry at the whole time, and it's realizing that she was wrong the whole time, and he has been innocent and is innocent,
and is also arguably the only person that understands truly where she comes from.
Literally, yeah, because a big part of Anya, she was getting slightly better, and it's going to get worse now, but like she was a half elf before, and she is no longer, and so she feels like she's a monstrosity and an abomination, and she shouldn't exist, and that Lisette should have finished the job. And you know, like why are her parents dead and she's still alive? And it's like, well, it's because McCall chose to keep her soul sort of intact and retain and release it and allow it to come back because he wanted
to preserve his old champion.
To preserve his old champ, have a way to free his old champion and then make her his new one. But like she doesn't have the full grasp of that yet, and there's just still a lot of trauma with that initially on top of everything else that happened in the last session. But yeah, like because I was like, this is gonna be fucking awful if I have to make my character hack and slash their way through her fucking parents, what's remains of her parents' corpses with, you know, like not, you know, we're 3rd level. We don't have a fucking vorpal sword. Like it, you know, it's like got a +1 longsword out here. It's like it's gonna take a minute. So, but Valentine was able to like get them mostly dead, and then Anya dealt the final blow. She's like, it kind of has to be me. Once it's like Paladin of Death God, also like she can't.
It's her parents,
with it unless she knows that it's done. But yeah, that was a very like horrifying and sweet, but also there's an objectively kind of funny moment because after they kind of figured that out, and it's like I can make it quick and I can get them close and then you can finish them off. And I was like, okay, take me with you. And she's like, all right. He turns. There's one funny moment where he's like, I'm gonna look unpleasant. She's like, I need you to
take a scan over to the doorway.
The fucking horrifying monstrosity that was once the forms of my parents. Nothing if it's not my parents' hodgepodge together face that you turn into, you're good, chief.
I don't give a fuck what you turn into.
Like you are literally, it could not be worse. That is the worst thing that I could see. I've already seen. Which like his form is so fucking awesome. It's like a wolf and like a spider, and
it's also just a conglomeration of limbs,
like limbs and like eyes and elements. It's so fucking cool. It's such a good mini, and he's also huge. He's like 8 feet tall, and he's in his like humanoid form, and he's like
enormous. There
was that moment where fucking Valentine turned around and went to like Jack, who was still like at the door, and in melee with the homunculus, and then Callista, who was had just finished up tinkering with like the tanks to sort of turn them all off. He's like, everybody get the fuck out.
I'm a coming.
And you let them basically have a free action to like disengage and get out. Because it's like this eldritch horde like yelling for you to fucking move, and no one touch me or hit me. Was like, yeah, no, fair. Like, we can do that.
I will ask no questions and do as I'm told. Thank you.
I can follow instructions. Not the moment to be a brat. Not today.
Not today.
Not right now. And yeah, so there's that moment where he kind of like wrapped his little like spider back leg limbs, weird thing. That's another thing we need to post a picture of so people can see
the mini.
So
I think it's technically a Critical Role mini.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Dope.
I saw it at the store and I was like,
you're like, I need this. You also have like that squishable plushie of like the forest demon, and that was like the emotional support
Valentine
that we could just like pass and hug because we're like, ah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, he just like bounds across it, kind of rips through the homunculus, and then there's that very sweet moment you had art for and didn't think you were going to get to use because they had such an
animosity towards each other.
Such animosity and such like an antagonistic dynamic toward each other, which like Anya apologized for that. She's like, I'm sorry I blamed you. And I thought she's like, no, there's no way you could have known.
Yeah.
Because like she didn't know what he was until recently. She didn't know that anything was sketchy.
Also, that man spent his whole life with people treating him like a monster just off sight alone. So like, he can't blame you.
No. And it's like, yeah, Anya was suspicious and angry and all that, but like she just sort of avoided him. Right. So it was thinking of at least she didn't like treat him
like shit, yeah,
like or try to hunt him down or something crazy. It was just she was afraid of him, which was fair given like the access she had to her memories of the time, and that she just wasn't able to see things clearly and didn't have all the information to process. But there was like this moment where I had her just kind of after she had sort of drove her sword through the heart of the homunculus and her parents' souls were released effectively, of like she just broke, because that was the thing of like since she'd been resurrected, her only real goal was like figuring out what happened to her parents and sort of like trying to reclaim that and trying to help them and all that. And so all of those strings
like coming together,
that were like binding her and tethering her to the world and her sense of self and everything were cut in that moment. And she just like collapses back into the chest. What might be a chest?
Chest, but it's kind of like an exposed rib cage.
But you fit in it. She fit.
But you fit snugly in there.
She's fairly petite. She's like 5'4" or something. Just like fell back into this monster that she'd been afraid of since her like first day at Strixhaven, and that was such a wonderful, beautiful, poetic moment of like a full circle thing. And also just like you brought it up last night, but I love how Anya as a character just has like the ultimate scary dog privilege of like she's just collecting
the scariest people,
the scariest motherfuckers of like Reyna and now like Valentine, who like I'm so excited to role play them now because she's lost, like she still has Ambrose and his husband Fallen, like who are her guardians, and like Reyna will still be in her life someday. Reyna lives in the Feywild and was running a fucking quarter, right?
Yeah.
She's busy. But like she's lost her parents, which were her big grounding points. And so there's the thing where I think she will sort of just go to Valentine and be like, can we be friends? And also because like he does understand that of like everything that you touch leads to death and suffering, and you feel like a monster, and you feel like all you are is like a portent of doom. And he's like really the only one that can understand that.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited for like cute interactions with Valentine, and he has a skeleton cat that just has like leaves. It's bone and leaf cat.
Bone cat, leaf body.
Yeah, and the
little bush cat.
It's with just like a mineral water, so it just like has like lizard time in like a pot of like nice enriched mineral water, and it's precious. So it's just like emotional support bone leaf cat, and
Yeah.
Tor and Anya.
It was really important to me, especially with like how much work we've done on your character and your backstory and everything that has like led up to this moment, for that to feel the way that it did. And like, yeah, like we mentioned before, where that combat, I had like structured it so that, yeah, there was like different elements. So like, for example, if y'all hadn't brought your guardians and hadn't told them,
Yeah.
I was gonna have it be like y'all were walking in as Valentine was killed and then turned into a monster, and then he would be the one kind of taking the brunt of like Lisette's attention, while there was like, you know, whatever lab assistants or corpse flower baby things.
There would have been like more lab.
To kind of take care of.
Yeah, like Valentine, it would have taken all of Lisette's focus to contain Valentine and try to not die for as long as she could have, but he would have eventually.
Yeah, Valentine was my fail-safe, whether it was good or bad.
Yeah. Valentine is ancient and could have killed this level 15 Dean. Like, that's not a problem for him.
And then, of course, like if y'all did notify your guardians, that's kind of the situation that came out of like, they would go take care of her while you had the chance to possibly save Valentine, and that like had a time element to it. So you're trying to take care of that. And because of like the map was so wide, it like took turns to get there. There's like things on the outskirts that would be quicker than just chopping away at the vines, but it takes time to get there. And also you have to do a check to do them. So I loved how y'all were like dividing and conquering, like Callista, because she was the one that initially in the prior room had figured out like how to shut them off, was doing the investigation checks at advantage, which originally I think was going to be at like disadvantage.
Yeah, because we wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah.
And no one other than Callista really knew how to do that. So
Yeah.
it's like I debated having Anya go help, but I'm like, she can't.
Yeah.
She's better served to try to heal Valentine and cut vines.
Yeah. And like, I loved how that kind of played out. And also just things that like, I liked how, even though I planned a lot of that, there was also so much that organically happened because of your choices as characters. Even that prior room with the baby corpse flowers and stuff. You know, I love that y'all engaged in combat, but then ended it through like a role play outcome. And then I had not thought about the fact that like of Callista asking him to retreat the corpse flowers and then destroy them in their tanks, and how that like very neatly tied into the later part of the dungeon. So like that wasn't something I planned for, but I love that it happened that way because then it felt very connected. And like the element of like the my plan with the corpse flower or the homunculus thing entering was so that because the map is so wide and its movement is rather slow, it would divert y'all's attention and be like, okay, now we got to handle that over there, but also handle this. And it's like, what's going to take priority? Are you going to let Valentine die in order to deal with that? Or are you going to risk your party members to try to free Valentine?
And also the thing of for Anya, when it was when the corpse came in at really the best possible time, because I had stacked, Divine Smite and Wrathful Smite and my best attacks. And I was like, I'm gonna do stupid damage. And okay, they're two fucking corpse flower tendrils things.
It was right at the end. Yeah.
And there was one more machine to turn off. So I was like, I'm gonna try to cut through it. If I don't for some reason, Callista will turn the last one off and he'll be out. And that was one of the twos that I rolled that I burned all my shit on, as fucking happens, right? When you stack all your stuff.
I think he was also 2 rounds away from turning or dying.
It was very close. It was a near thing. Because I think Jack and I had given him some health potions. I think Anya dumped her whole lay on hands pool into him
to try to delay it.
And there was I love that little moment where I appreciate you gave me inspiration for it because I fucking needed it. When she was singing a little an elven lullaby that her mom sang to her, as to just because he was frantic and freaking out and didn't want obviously to turn into a monster.
Well, I think it's also he started panicking because Jack is standing on top of him holding a sword.
Yeah, also that that is not super comforting when you've been hunted your whole life and then someone is over you. In Jack's defense, there were binds around Valentine's throat that
Yeah.
were choking him. And so Jack like jumped up, but Jack's fucking like, you're like 6'1" or 6'2" something, and was trying to cut the binds from his throat, which he did successfully. But then when Valentine opened his eyes, there's just someone with a knife to his throat, a big ass dragon board.
Big ass dragon board, big ass sword pointed right at your throat.
Yep. And just, he's, not the anxiety has mounted, and like if he's like, oh, is somebody, these people are trying to fucking kill me, and it's like, this is a student, if the student hurts me, then I'm gonna fucking absorb them.
Yeah.
And like it's a mess. So I had Anya like do the little like sing that lullaby. I think it was one to calm him, but then to also calm and ground herself.
Yeah.
Because she had to stay with the program and not immediately lose her shit. But yeah, it was that perfect timing of when she lost it, Callista kind of went right after her. She freed Valentine, and then he was able to get up and like cast
Everything
a
can-
boot
yeah.
healing spell on himself and restabilize himself. And I was like, once Valentine is in the combat,
Then it's cool.
then we're fine. Like we have a pretty clear solution. Like, yeah, even if a horde does come in, or like everything else, like if the guy called in reinforcements and like everyone else rushes in, like we have a fucking Eldritch horror like fighting. We'll be all right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And like ultimately, I think that whole session was one, like my most ambitious undertaking. And I think it was like the best example for me of both planning a lot for that session, but also like knowing what sessions are good to plan for, and also keeping communication with your players and having them help you plan.
Absolutely.
Helps a ton.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of like setting the right expectation. Everyone knows what they're kind of coming into. I like doing it in a way that is not railroady. It's like, hey, we're going to cover a lot of stuff, so there has to be some structure.
Yep.
But I'm still going to give you the wiggle room to make your choices and have it
And you mix and match,
improvise.
and
Yeah.
they make the most sense. So yeah, one of my favorite things about the Strixhaven campaign and Trobdane and like all of our characters and everything is that we've really co-created the world with you,
Mhm.
which is pretty rare, I think, because a lot of like when it's a full homebrew world, so that adds a nice element of customization and a lot of control. But I would definitely advise that too with DMs of like let your players develop their
Dictate
backstory
some stuff.
and like let them help you flesh out the world and flesh out NPCs, and don't feel like you need to do everything yourself, because if they have that buy-in, then they're as invested in the world as you.
Exactly. And like I think it's really good to have both. If you are like a purely improvisational DM, all the power to you. If you're all about the planning, I think it's just about whether like understanding the players at your table, what their specific needs are, if there's sessions that are better to improv, if there's sessions that are better to plan, or do a marriage of the two. Because again, even as much planning as I did, there's still so much of it that came out of the improvisational aspect of it, and things that I couldn't have planned for, but like by God, did it look like I did.
It really did. Absolutely.
Just because of how it played out, I was like, this is good. This is tying neat little bows around things that makes it look like I had that in mind the whole time.
There's so much shit that you pull off the cuff that like you told me restrict, you're like, I
was like on a whim.
Or like you're like, I blacked out. I forgot I said that. And I'm like, I figured, but it was so good.
So good.
And now we're using it.
Yeah. So it's like don't be afraid to lean into that.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to plan, but also accept those moments of improvisation, because I think some of the best things come off of the moments you didn't plan for.
For sure. And I think like planning to give yourself the freedom and like the mental organization and be able to relax into what you're doing so you can improv, and like not planning to a point where it's like if it doesn't go to plan, now you're devastated and you feel like you've wasted a lot of time, but just planning to that point where it helps you lean back and experience the session with your players.
Exactly.
And have that freedom to change things in improv as you go.
Yeah.
Is the kind of sweet spot that we're all trying to hit.
I agree. Well, I think that's it for that. But thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website,
mythosmediaproductions.godaddysite.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.